Business impact analysis, or BIA, is often treated as a compliance template. That is the wrong starting point. A pragmatic BIA is not about completing rows in a workbook. It is about creating recovery logic that leaders can actually use during disruption. This explainer is designed for general industry, manufacturing, healthcare, finance, logistics, retail, technology, utilities, public services, and other sectors. The goal is simple: understand what must survive, how fast it must recover, and what minimum capacity is needed to keep the organization operating. Most BIAs fail because they become paperwork. The organization may have a large workbook, completed questionnaires, and formal documentation. But when disruption happens, leadership still may not know what to restore first, who owns the decision, or which dependency can break the value chain. That is the real problem. A decision first BIA answers the practical questions: what must survive? How fast must it recover? What minimum capacity is acceptable? And what failure points must be controlled? If the BIA does not change recovery priorities, it has limited value. The useful part of BIA is that the logic works across industries. The sector changes, but the decision structure does not. First, identify the outcomes the organization must protect: cash flow, safety, legal obligations, service commitments, and trust. Second, map the value chains that deliver those outcomes. Third, define tolerance using MTPD, RTO, minimum capacity, and impact thresholds. Fourth, validate dependencies. Finally, define triggers for BCP activation, escalation, investment, or scenario testing. The output is not a perfect spreadsheet. It is defensible recovery logic. A pragmatic BIA starts with protected outcomes, not department questionnaires. Ask what the enterprise cannot afford to lose. Cash flow protects liquidity, billing, claims, payroll, and revenue. Life and safety protect employees, customers, patients, and the public. Legal duty protects regulatory, contractual, and license obligations. Service continuity protects production, care, transport, transactions, and public service delivery. Trust protects reputation, investors, stakeholders, and community confidence. The test is simple. If this outcome fails, does the organization lose money, violate law, harm people, stop service, or lose trust? BIA should prioritize value chains, not departments. A disruption does not respect the organizational chart. It attacks the chain of value delivery. In healthcare, that chain may run from patient admission, diagnosis, treatment, medication, and discharge. In banking, it may run from customer transaction, payment processing, settlement, and regulatory reporting. In manufacturing, it may run from supplier input, production, quality release, shipment, and billing. Department-based BIA often creates fragmented answers. Value chain BIA shows what actually needs to recover together. Disruption type helps planning, but impact should trigger action. Natural disruption includes typhoons, floods, earthquakes, pandemics, extreme weather, wildfire, and severe heat. Accidental man-made disruption includes equipment failure, utility outage, vendor collapse, transport interruption, system failure, and workplace incidents. Intentional disruption includes cyber attack, fraud, sabotage, data theft, civil disruption, physical security threat, and malicious insider action. But the practical rule is this: do not activate BCP just because an event sounds serious. Activate based on whether impact has crossed tolerance. A useful BIA creates recovery sequence. A weak BIA creates political noise. The common failure is treating everything as critical. That destroys prioritization. Use consequence tiers instead. Existential items threaten survival, public safety, or core service delivery. Material items create board-level financial, legal, or regulatory impact. Operational items cause significant disruption but can be managed. Deferrable items can tolerate delay. For example, emergency care, payment networks, and utility grid control may be existential. Archiving or non-critical training may be deferrable. Prioritize consequence, not the loudest stakeholder. The core BIA question is simple. When does impact become unacceptable? That question defines three critical numbers. MTPD, or maximum tolerable period of disruption, is the survival limit. Beyond this point, damage becomes unacceptable. RTO, or recovery time objective, is the recovery target. It defines how fast minimum service must be restored before reaching the survival limit. Minimum capacity defines the lowest acceptable operating level during disruption. RTO is not just an IT number, it is a business tolerance decision. Dependencies are what actually break operations. A process can be documented, approved, and audited, but still fail if one dependency is missing. Consider the dependency categories: people, assets, technology, data, suppliers, utilities, communications, cash, and legal support. In a hospital, emergency care cannot recover if the electronic medical record, pharmacy stock, nurses, generators, or ambulance communications fail. In other sectors, the same principle applies. The BIA must expose weak links in the chain, not merely describe the process. The same BIA questions apply across sectors, but the consequences differ. In healthcare, what must survive may be emergency care and critical patient records. In finance, it may be payments, settlement, fraud controls, and regulatory reporting. In manufacturing, it may be production, release, and shipment. In retail or e-commerce, it may be order intake, fulfillment, and customer service. In logistics, it may be dispatch, route visibility, and hub operations. In public service, it may be citizen-facing critical services. The method is universal. The impact is sector-specific. Take a ransomware outage. The problem is not simply restore IT. The real question is, which business capability must recover first? If core systems are unavailable, teams may lose access to customer, patient, operational, or financial data. A weak response restores systems based on pressure or visibility. A pragmatic BIA restores based on consequence. For a hospital, the first focus may be emergency care records, medication, diagnostics, and life safety communications. For a bank, it may be payments, customer access, fraud controls, and regulatory reporting. BIA prevents blind restoration. BIA turns disruption into decision gates. Escalation should be conditional, not automatic. Gate 1 asks, has the impact exceeded tolerance? If yes, activate BCP. If not, manage the event as an emergency or operational incident. Gate 2 asks, has the response exceeded organizational capacity? If yes, declare a crisis. If not, continue recovery under controlled response. This distinction matters. BIA does not replace management judgment. It gives leadership the thresholds needed to make faster, more consistent decisions under pressure. A pragmatic BIA can be done through 4 steps. First, frame the scope. Define protected outcomes, covered services, criticality tiers, and workshop owners. Second, map the value chains that deliver critical outcomes. Do not start by treating every department equally. Third, assess impact over time, MTPD, RTO, minimum capacity, and critical dependencies. Fourth, validate assumptions through scenarios. The minimum viable output should be clear. Priority value chains, recovery tolerances, dependency risks, trigger thresholds, and a scenario test plan. Before trusting a BIA, test it against common failure modes. Template obsession creates completed forms but weak decisions. Treating everything as critical destroys recovery sequence. IT-owned RTO can create wrong recovery priorities because business tolerance is ignored. Untested workarounds create false confidence. Weak dependency mapping hides single points of failure. The correction is straightforward. Start with protected outcomes, prioritize value chains, assign business owner tolerance decisions, validate manual fallback, and map real dependencies. The practical test is this. Could leadership use the BIA during a crisis within 5 minutes? The value of BIA is not the template. The value is the recovery logic it gives leadership. A useful BIA answers 5 questions. What must survive? How fast must it recover? What minimum capacity is enough? Which dependencies can break it? And when do we activate BCP or declare crisis? That is the practical formula. BIA, prioritize, protect, recover. If leaders cannot use the BIA under pressure, the BIA has failed its real purpose.